Have you ever watched someone lose everything and yet stand tall, not break, not scream, just breathe? A quiet force in the midst of chaos, not because they don't feel pain, but because they've learned to carry it. You see them. They don't talk about their suffering. They don't need to. It echoes in their silence. It's written in the lines on their face, in the weight of their gaze, in the stillness of their hands. We've all been there, shattered by something no one sees, gripping the edges of ourselves, trying not to fall apart in the dark. But few choose to endure. Most run, escape, deny, wrap themselves in distractions, in personas, in false light. Anything not to feel. Yet pain, when faced, transforms, and those who dare to stay with it become something else entirely. That's who we're here to become. Do you ever feel like someone finally sees the part of you you've always hidden? Here, you don't have to hide anymore. You're safe now. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so we can keep walking this path together. Thank you. Endurance is not survival. It's not passivity. It's not just getting through the day. Endurance is choosing to stay present when everything in you wants to vanish. It's what Nietzsche called the will to power, not domination over others, but over the self. The ability to shape suffering into strength. There's something deeply sacred about those who have suffered and yet do not harden. They remain soft, tender, not because they are weak, but because they've seen the abyss and chose to feel it rather than become it. You say you're tired. I know. You say you've given all you could. I believe you. But there's still something inside you, isn't there? That flicker, that pulse, that whisper that says, keep going. That's not delusion. That's yourself speaking. Not the mask, not the ego, but the real raw core of who you are. Endurance begins when the story ends, when the identity crumbles, when you are no longer sure who you are or what anything means. That's when the work begins. To endure is to stop begging for the storm to pass and start becoming the one who walks through it, slowly, deliberately, without asking the world to understand. There's a kind of beauty in the broken. Not the Instagram kind, the sacred kind, the kind that whispers, I have lost, and I am still here. You become someone else in that fire, someone deeper, someone more real, someone who doesn't flinch when life strikes. Carl Jung would say this is the path of individuation, to integrate the shadow, to stop pretending you are only light, to meet your darkness with presence, not panic. You will want to give up. You will want to scream. You will want to numb. And you might. But then you will choose to stay again and again, because you're not here to escape pain. You're here to alchemize it. There is no rescue coming, no savior, no magic exit, just you and the path you carve in the dark. But there's power in that, in knowing that you are the one who endures. Because those who endure, truly endure, don't just survive. They awaken, they rise, and in doing so, they become a lighthouse for others lost in the storm. So hold on, not to what you had, but to what you are becoming. What happens when you stop asking for the pain to go away and start listening to what it's trying to teach you? We'll explore that in the next part. There's a silence that doesn't feel peaceful, the kind that wraps around your chest like cold hands, a silence that makes you question everything, especially yourself. Not the kind of silence that comes when the world sleeps, but the one that follows a betrayal, an abandonment, a collapse. When you sit alone and no one calls, when no one notices your absence, when your phone stays quiet, and so does your soul. In that silence, most people run. They open a screen, light a cigarette, text an ex, anything to feel something, anything but this. But if you don't run, if you stay in that silence long enough, something strange begins to happen. The mask starts to fall off. We wear so many masks. Some we inherit, some we create. Some are stitched from wounds, others from expectations. The persona, that curated version of us the world claps for. But beneath it is a self that hasn't spoken in years, a self exiled in order to be loved, a self that whispered no when we said yes. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But how can you find your why when you've buried it under masks and performance? That silence is not punishment. It is invitation. It's the self asking to be remembered. It's the soul tapping lightly, asking, "Are you still in there?" Most people mistake the silence for emptiness, but it's full, brimming, with old griefs, forgotten dreams, suppressed rage, all the things you never gave voice to, and it will hurt. At first, like thawing a body gone cold, like waking from a long sleep and realizing how much time you've lost. But it is in this rawness that the real you starts to surface. You see, endurance isn't about clenched fists. It's about honest surrender, not to the world, but to your own truth. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress, the jealousy, the hatred, the neediness. We're taught to hide them, to deny, to pretend. But what you deny controls you, and what you face transforms. The silence is sacred because it makes space for the shadow to speak. And when it does, it doesn't sound like a monster. It sounds like a child, frightened, lonely, desperate to be held. When you learn to hold that part of you, without judgment, without fear, you become whole. Not perfect, whole. And wholeness, not perfection, is what gives you power. Endurance is not about pretending you're fine. It's about being real in your brokenness. It's about letting the wound speak and not running from what it says. Because in your most silent, most shattered moments, your truest self begins to rise. To endure is to unmask, to sit in silence until the persona shatters and the self emerges. It is painful. It is disorienting. It is necessary. Because everything built on pretense will fall. And when it does, you'll finally hear your own voice beneath the noise. The one that says, "I am still here." And that voice is the beginning of everything. But once the voice returns, what do you do with it? What happens when your truth no longer fits the life you've built? That we'll explore in the next part. Have you ever felt like you were outgrowing your own life? Like the clothes, the roles, the relationships, all of it no longer fit, but you keep wearing them anyway? It's a quiet dissonance. You smile, you show up, but inside something pulls away. Not because you're ungrateful, but because you've changed and your life hasn't caught up. This is where many people break, not from pain, but from the fear of letting go. Because to choose truth over comfort means burning what kept you warm, even if it was never real heat. And still, you must burn it. When the self returns, it does not come gently. It does not ask for permission. It arrives like a wave, like a scream beneath the skin, demanding, disruptive, alive. You begin to realize the life you built was a compromise, built on who you thought you had to be loved, to be safe, to be chosen. But now that you remember, you can no longer lie to yourself. The job that drains you, the love that suffocates you, the friendships that vanish when you say no. you start seeing it all clearly, and it hurts. Because awakening doesn't give you what you want. It shows you what you've tolerated. Carl Jung warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. But once you've heard the voice of the soul, you can't unhear it. This is the season of rupture, of shedding, of undoing, not as destruction, but as liberation. Endurance here is not staying where you are. It is leaving, walking away from the familiar, even when your hands shake. You might lose people, you will lose certainty, but what you gain is integrity. Not the kind that makes you moral, the kind that makes you whole. And so you begin the process, not of fixing your life, but of building a new one. From truth, from alignment, from soul. It will feel lonely. You will doubt yourself. You will question everything. But beneath that ache is a deeper knowing, one that whispers, this pain is cleaner. It's real. It's yours. And that is the kind of pain that heals. To endure is not to hold on. It is to let go. To endure is to walk away. To say, I choose truth, even if it costs me everything false. Because what's the point of a life built on pretending? What's the point of being loved for someone you're not? There is power in becoming unrecognizable to the version of you who settled. And so you walk into the unknown, into yourself, into what's next. But what happens when the new life begins to form, when you've burned it all down? What rises from the ashes? Have you ever looked around at the new life you built and felt nothing? Not sadness, not joy, just a kind of hollow stillness, like a room you once lived in but no longer recognize. You left the lies, you spoke the truth, you endured the breaking, you made it through the storm, but now what? This is the moment no one talks about. The after, when the fire is gone and the silence returns, but in a new form. A silence that asks, now that you've burned it all, who will you become? You thought the hardest part was leaving, but the real weight is building. To endure destruction is one thing. To endure creation, that's something else entirely. You are no longer the one in pain, begging for release. You are now the one holding space for your becoming, for your responsibility, for your power. But power without identity is terrifying. You walk into a life with no map, no familiar names to call you back, no more applause for the old masks, no rituals to tell you who you are, just breath, just time, just the rawness of being. It's here most people turn back, rebuild the old life with new paint, recycle old identities, chase another external goal, another savior, another distraction, because to sit in the void of rebirth is unbearable unless you choose to sanctify it. You are now the artist of your own becoming, but creation demands chaos. Nietzsche spoke of this. He said, you need chaos in your soul to give birth to a dancing star. This chaos is not punishment, it's possibility. Everything that no longer defines you is being stripped so that you may choose, consciously, what does. But choice is a burden because it demands you take ownership. You are no longer the victim, you are the architect. Every day becomes an altar, every act a declaration. You are no longer asking, what do they want from me? You begin asking, what do I want to create with what I've survived? And you'll find it strange to no longer be moved by the same things, to no longer find safety in smallness, to crave something raw, real, sacred. You may lose your voice for a while, not because you're broken, but because you're learning a new language, One that doesn't beg, one that doesn't explain, one that simply expresses. Carl Jung would say you are now integrating the self, the totality of who you are. No longer fragmented, no longer choosing between light and shadow. You are becoming whole. And wholeness isn't loud. It doesn't seek attention. It doesn't need to prove. It just is. You'll feel this in strange ways. The absence of drama, the absence of need, the quiet joy in doing something for its own sake, the way your energy no longer leaks into trying to be understood. You'll notice the absence of the old ache, the compulsion to explain yourself, to be liked, to be chosen. You won't need to be chosen because you've chosen yourself. This is the most confronting part. Not the pain, but the peace that follows it. The terrifying spaciousness of a life that no longer demands performance. And with that space comes the truth. You never had to become anything else. You only had to return to the self before the wound, to the voice before the world silenced it, to the fire before it was tamed. This is not reinvention. This is remembrance. And to endure this stage, this gentle, still, spacious unfolding is the final test. Not a test of strength, but of faith. What rises from the ashes is not a better version of who you were. It's the original self, untouched, unmasked, undeniable. You are not becoming someone else. You are finally becoming yourself. And that self may be quiet, but it is radiant, rooted, free. This is the point where most people look around and say, now what? And the answer is not a goal, not a destination. The answer is to live fully, presently, without apology. You have endured what should have broken you. Now you begin. But what does it mean to live without the need to endure? To stop surviving and start expressing? What does it mean to live without the need to endure? To not survive, but to create? To no longer be at war with life, but to dance with it? There comes a moment after the fire, after the silence, after the remembering, when something wild stirs inside you, a hunger not to be safe, but to be seen, not to be accepted, but to be expressed. This is the life beyond endurance, and few ever make it here, not because they can't, but because they don't believe they deserve to. But you do. Expression is not the opposite of suffering. It is the evolution of it. All that pain, all that silence, all those nights you held yourself together, they weren't in vain. They were the soil. This is the bloom. You've met your shadow. You've faced your silence. You've dismantled the lie. Now you begin to live from soul, not survival. But here's the truth most don't prepare you for. Joy is terrifying, because joy requires presence, vulnerability, openness. It means letting life touch you again and again, without armoring up. It means laughter that doesn't need permission, grief that isn't rushed, movement that isn't watched. You start to create not because you have something to prove, but because you have something to pour. You write, you build, you dance, you kiss, you cry. You stop managing your image. You stop asking, what will they think? And start asking, what do I feel? You become an artist of the real, not because you hold a brush, but because your entire life becomes the canvas. Nietzsche knew this kind of life. He called it the eternal return, not as a curse, but as a challenge. If you had to live this life over and over, would you still choose it? Would you say yes to every moment, knowing how much it could cost you? When you live from expression, the answer becomes yes. Not because it's painless, but because it's yours. This is the paradox. The one who endures the deepest suffering often creates the most radiant joy, because they have known the void and chosen life anyway. You will still feel the weight of the world, but you will no longer carry it alone. Because now your presence does the work. Your being is the offering. You begin to live as art, as mirror, as permission. Not to be perfect, but to be real. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This is that privilege, not loud, not flashy, but undeniable. You laugh more now. You rest without guilt. You say no with softness. You let others walk away. And you stay. You stay with yourself, not because it's easy, but because it's true. You no longer chase purpose. You embody it. Your purpose is not a mission. It is a presence. You. So what does it mean to live beyond endurance? It means to become the one who no longer needs to be seen, because they finally see themselves. It means to walk without performing, to speak without rehearsing, to love without fearing the end. You are no longer the one in the fire. You are the one who carries it. And wherever you go, that fire warms, illuminates, awakens. This is not the end of suffering, but it is the end of living as if suffering is all there is. You've endured. Now you express. And that truly is what makes you free. Become who you are, Nietzsche.